Hello, folks. My name is Jim Worthen. The show is Worthen One-on-One. We are here every Friday at 7 o'clock in the evening, and then 2 o'clock Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday during the week. But that was my old sainted brother who was into jazz and kind of a bohemian, said, that's just the first verse. I guess that's how they talked about music. And he said, so we are also going up on the internet through TVSB website and through YouTube. So you can tell your friends all over the world to watch Worthen One-on-One. And this show will be one of the top shows because I've got two of the top guests I've ever had. And that's saying a lot out of 400 shows and 300 different guests. Although, Tim, I think you did 5 or 6 of that 300. Yeah. And Jerry, you did several. My guests are Jerry Root, is Pastor Root, philosopher, Professor Root, all of the above. And Tim Tremblay Financial. And we were really scheduled today because Jerry's going to be back and talk about something he's an expert in, that is C.S. Lewis, in 2 weeks. So mark your calendar. But Tim and I were going to talk politics and the economy, and Tim called up and said, I'm bringing Jerry Root. We want to do a show on us. Yeah. Okay. You don't turn Tim Tremblay down. And they have exciting stories about their life and knowledge of each other, and I will ask some questions because I've heard from both of them and I've done other shows, but I'll try and stay out of it. And I've told Tim he can, slap me on the forehead if I get out of control. So, where did you guys meet?
I remember exactly. I was pastoring a church here in town, and this woman came up to me and said, I want to introduce you to somebody, and you guys are going to become best friends. And so I met him in a pew at a church, and he said, yeah, well, let's go to lunch. So I'm an extrovert, but Tim makes me look like an introvert by comparison. And he mother henned up another 6 people at this lunch, and we had this great conversation. There were spiritual things, there were things related to football, tender things where there were misty-eyed tears, and we laughed and so on. And afterwards, he goes to pay the bill. And I stuffed my money in his pocket. And he said, no, Jerry, I've got this. I pulled him aside and I said, there's no doubt in my mind you can get this. But if you're always picking up the tab whenever we're together, you may wonder why I'm actually showing up.
Right.
Just between you and me, we'll go Dutch, and you never have to have a doubt as to why I'm here. And we became best friends. But there were many experiences that solidified this.
I think I met you, and it was just nice to meet you, Pastor, at the same church, Trinity Baptist Church on Cienfuegos. That when you two?
Yeah, that's where we met.
Yeah.
Well, it's interesting because I was brought up in the Catholic tradition. My wife was brought up in the evangelical Christian tradition. And when we got married, my secret was that I was going to convert her to being a Catholic. And her secret is she was going to convert me to being an evangelical Christian. Well, I got her to go to Mass for the first 15 years or so of our marriage. We'll be married 50 years in January. We got married when
She must have been 10 when you married her.
We were still in school. We got married when I was at Wake Forest University. And after that 15 years, she goes, I'm just not getting fed enough. My sister's going to Trinity Baptist. I want you to come with me up there. And I go, great. We're going to go up to this heathen church where these people left the true faith. But all right, she did it for me, so I'll do it for her. So I go there, and Jerry is the pastor. And he uses football illustrations in his sermon. I said, this isn't so bad. This guy's pretty good. Yeah. So I got to hear him first, and then we got to meet each other. And as Jerry tells you, we become best friends. And this is over many years.
Yeah. There's another side to it, though, too. Every Sunday morning, Tim gets up and goes to Stearns Wharf to watch the sunrise. So I come to town now. I mean, I lived here for 6 years, but then I moved back to the Midwest where I was a professor at Wheaton College in Chicago area. And I come here now for the winter since I've retired because I don't want to shovel snow anymore. And Tim goes, we go to the Stearns Wharf. So we go to Stearns Wharf and we watch the sunrise, and it's incredible. And then we go to the old mission, Santa Barbara Mission, for services. Then we go get some breakfast. Then we pick up our wives and we go to another church in town, South Coast. And the deal is, I have never heard a sermon at the mission that I couldn't hear preached at a Protestant church. And there's seldom I hear a sermon preached at a Protestant church I couldn't hear preached at the mission. So I think our lack of knowledge of one another, our lack of experience with one another, makes it easy for us to believe the worst about other people rather than the best.
Well, I'm older than you, and I remember how hard the Catholic Church was on Protestantism, and how closed they were in the 40s, 50s, and 60s. And it has changed so dramatically. It really has. And but I have a godson, Danny Castignola, who is a fisherman. Right now he's caring for his 96-year-old grandmother. And Danny won't come to a Protestant church. He's a Catholic, and he's still in that tradition that I have to go only to the Catholic church. And I try to convince him, and my son, he's my godson. You can come and visit. No.
Vatican II opened up the doors quite a bit, but one thing that was interesting to me, when I lived here before, St. Raphael's used to have a confirmation, adult confirmation class. They'd have about 150 with 150 sponsors. And they would ask me to come in and teach. I was a Protestant pastor. They'd ask me to come in and teach the unit on how to be born again. They said, have them raise their hands. Don't pussyfoot around, let them make a true commitment. They were seeing more conversions for Christ in this town than any other church that I was aware of. So the lines of demarcation are not as clear. The other thing I've seen is the more secular the society gets, the less the things that divide us as Christians seem to matter. They still are concerns. We have our values and we have our positions, but the true faith, the essential things that C.S. Lewis called mere Christianity, those are the things that unite us. And there was a famous theologian, a German theologian, his name was Rupert Moldenius, and he said, in essentials, unity. In non-essentials, liberty. But in all things, charity. And I think that's the Christian
What was
approach.
his name? I only knew one German theologian.
Rupert Moldenius, and he worked with Philip Melanchthon.
Yeah.
Jerry was the pastor at Trinity Baptist when I first met him. And at the time, I was a football coach at Bishop Diego. And my son started there. Of course, I played at Bishop, in my high school days. And then my son started there with his friends that I coached before they got to high school. And I got a call from the principal of Bishop Diego. And he said, we don't have a coach. I see your son's out for football. You have some football experience. Can you help us out? And I said, well, I'm real busy. I was a senior vice president at Prudential Base. And I said, well, I'll help out. After the first practice, I was the head coach of the JV football. And so as I coached, I convinced Jerry to coach with me. So Jerry and some of his friends, we had a whole group of these great coaches. And we had a great, they hadn't won a game in 3 years, and we went 6-4 and really saw some things change at Bishop. Within 3 years, they were in the CIF finals and had won the Tri-Valley League, and the whole football program turned around.
Yeah.
But we were going to play Carpinteria. And traditionally, before the Carpinteria game, we would have a mass before the game. And, the priest at the time that was the principal said, he was going to say the mass in the chapel, and you could have the whole football team there. And the football team came up to me and said, Coach, can you have Coach Root do the sermon instead of Father? And I said, yeah, let me ask him. So I asked him, he goes, well, this is a Catholic church. He's the pastor of the Baptist church. I don't know about that. And I said, this would be an ecumenical movement. What a great example you would show. So he said, all right. So Jerry did the sermon at Mass before the game, and of course we beat Carpinteria, our arch rival, as a result.
Bishop Diego, I know people, devout Protestants, who send their children there going back 50 years because of it, the education.
Yeah.
A lot of people think it's a religious school. It is, but that's the kind of education a lot of parents search for.
Sure.
Now I blew the word providential hall. It's Providence, yeah, hall. They're filling a lot of the gap that was there that Bishop filled for years, and it's just a blessing.
C.S. Lewis said to his students in Oxford University in the 1930s, "We fulfilled our whole duty to you if we can help you see some given tract of reality." What he meant by that is that texts say something. And it's not merely something relativistic where you can say what you think it says, somebody else could say what they think it says, without any respect to the text itself.
Oh, yeah.
And he wanted to get them back to the text. And what you see in schools like Bishop or Providence is they want the students to know what the text says. They can benefit by discussions, they get perspective around the text, but benefiting by that perspective helps them grow intellectually.
Well,
it's substantive.
Well, you have the greatest history book ever written sitting there, the Bible. People don't realize that it's a history book, from God's.
All of that and more.
Yeah.
It's not merely a history book.
But through that history, the more comes in.
Yeah.
And it's a blessing to see these schools that are teaching not just reading, writing, and arithmetic, but also the Bible and faith.
It's a tragic thing. I'm in Chicago, and there are kids who are finishing up school in the Chicago Unified School District, and they don't know how to read or write after 12 years of school. They know everything about sex education, but nothing about reading, writing, arithmetic, and so on. And it's tragic.
Well, that happens here in Santa Barbara.
Yeah.
It is. Okay, let's get back to you're playing football at Bishop.
Yeah, I played football at Bishop, did well there. Then I went to Santa Barbara City College, and I was captain of the football team there. Made all conference. My wife Marcia was a cheerleader.
She's the one that rejected you and rejected you, right?
That's right. You know that story. First time I asked her out, she said no. I said, "Do you know who I am?" She goes, "Yes."
Yeah,
you're out of here. So the chase was on. We got married when I was still at Wake Forest. I got a full ride to play football at Wake Forest University. And great experience, Atlantic Coast Conference. We played in the Rice Bowl in Japan. Got to go and play against a Japanese football team. And
Did you win?
Oh, yeah. You better.
But your baseball team didn't win.
He's too humble to tell you this. So when he was at Wake Forest, he was captain of the team, and he was Atlantic Coast Conference Player of the Week as an offensive guard. It never happens. It's a receiver, a fullback, a quarterback, as a guard. He just pancaked this guy play after play.
I try to avoid pointing out that the brains of a team are the quarterback, but the brawn is necessary also.
Well, if you're at Wake Forest, you combine brains and brawn. It's a very
and the offensive linemen
school.
are the smartest guys on the team. We all know that.
Yeah.
So, but anyway, so I had this football.
Yeah, being
experience.
an offensive lineman in high school got me put in the hospital with a back that's hurt my whole life.
Yeah, but it was worth it.
It was.
So I had this football experience, and then Jerry, I got to meet him. He becomes my close friend, and he's putting together a football team through Wheaton College, Project Timothy, where they're going to go to the Soviet Union. It was just opening up. It was 91. It was Glasnost, Perestroika, and they were going to go and play against these Russian football teams. And he asked me to play, and I said, Jerry, I'll say a prayer for you, but I'm not going to Russia to play football. I'm a senior vice president at Prudential Bay. I don't have to, but God bless you. Well, a player got hurt. They needed another player. I was in shape. I was coaching football. I've been working out with the kids at Bishop. And he said, we need you. And I said, I'll tell you what, if my manager says I can go and my wife says I can go, I'll do it. I figured there's no way.
Yeah.
My manager at Peru Bay says, you're in shape, a great opportunity. We'll hold the fort down, you go. I go, great. So then I go to my wife and I said, no way, she's going to say. She goes, oh, what a great opportunity. You need to do this. So next thing I know, I got pads and a helmet and I'm working out with Jerry and the American Eagles football team.
I can understand American Eagles, but why was it called Project Timothy?
I used to coach at Wheaton College, where I eventually became a professor. When I was coaching there was a foundation that was started, and they did sports ministry all over the world, and they also had a program where they would send professors all over the world to teach, oftentimes in underground schools. I would teach in these schools behind behind the Iron Curtain. They couldn't get theology, they couldn't get philosophy, so we would go teach clandestinely in those places, and the foundation was called Project Timothy. Oh. And we had a track coach who was there, who from the 60s was bringing track teams to Eastern Europe, and we had numbered pastors. He would say to his handlers, we go to church, and we know you have churches here, we want to go to church. Well, we would number a pastor. A number one would be a communist, a Marxist plant in a church, just informing and so on. A number two would be a pastor who is a real Christian, but sometimes in interrogation had compromised and ratted out somebody in their congregation. So they always use that. If you don't tell us more, we're going to tell your congregation what you did. A number three was a person who was true. And a number four was a person who hated communism and thought the church was a place where they could stick it to the communists. So this track coach, missionaries couldn't go in, they couldn't go talk to somebody, they didn't know if they were a 1, 2, 3, or 4. But this track coach would go and take his track team Sunday morning, Sunday night, and midweek, all the while that he had these track teams there for a month at a time. They had great success as athletes. And they found out who the threes were, and the threes knew who the other threes were, and missions started to expand.
Who were the threes again?
The threes were the ones that were true Christian pastors who hadn't compromised. I was in the stairwell at Oxford University of the Bodleian Library, and I had this guy from Keston College. They did a lot of work behind the Iron Curtain, and he told me there were 4 people that he thought had the biggest influence as outsiders on what was going on in the church in Eastern Europe at that time, and he named them, and one of them was this guy, Don Church. We used to call him Bubba, and I go, do you know Don Church? He was a dyslexic track coach, but had this huge impact on Eastern Europe. I remember walking through the streets of Prague with him while communism was still in power, and people recognized him and came out, said, Baba, Baba, and they'd want to talk with him. It was a remarkable thing, a man of great humility, and that foundation that sponsored all this was Operation Timothy.
Yeah.
It was a tremendous experience. I mean, I think back on it now, it was an experience of a lifetime. To go to the Soviet Union, and we lived with people there in the Soviet Union. We were in Moscow, and then we went to Donetsk in the Ukraine. We were in Kharkov in the Ukraine. We played the very first game that was ever played American football in the Czech Republic. It was the American Eagles against the Vienna Vikings, who had just won the European Super Bowl. What a great experience. But to see lives change because of our testimony and sharing our faith with these folks that were so hungry for it was just amazing.
Well, you slipped something in there. It was the American Eagles and the Vienna.
Well, our last game was against the Vienna Vikings in the Czech Republic. We played the Russians all Russian teams in Kharkov and Donetsk in the Soviet Union.
Yeah.
Donetsk and Kiev. No, Kharkov.
Kharkov.
Yeah.
Donetsk and Kiev.
Yeah. And so, that was tremendous. And then we finished with the Vienna Vikings. Now, Jerry and I never left the field for 5 games. We had offense, defense, with special teams. I was a long snapper on punts and PATs. It was an amazing experience, except for one game. Jerry came off for 4 plays, and he sees me, and I run by, and I go, shake my head, and I keep running. He comes out, he goes, "You want to take a blow?" And I go, "No." And so he missed 4 plays out of 5 games.
If I would have known then that he would never let me forget that, I wouldn't have taken it for either.
That's right.
He remembers bad stories. Yeah.
But
Say something nice about Jerry for a change.
you know, of the people I've met in my lifetime, I've never seen anyone that has had the impact to change people for the better toward Christianity and everything that it stands for as Jerry Root has. It's just been a privilege and an honor to know this guy over these years, and to be able to call him my best friend. I think I'm one of the luckiest guys in the world.
Well, that's what I say about Tim.
I was going to say, you're his younger brother.
Well, I'm retired. I'm retired now, and I'm making more money retired than I ever made when I was working, because I can't add. The last math class I took, I was a sophomore in high school, and so I just handed him all my stuff, and he took care of it, and I'm doing really well now. So, and the other thing too is about Christian faith. I think of all the kids that he influenced at Bishop Diego. There's a whole bunch of them. You know, the wake is wide and long from the people he's influenced. So I think that God gave us hearts that sort of beat along the same line, and I think that also bonded us as well.
Yeah.
And there's nothing in my life I couldn't talk about with him. There's no secrets, there's no hidden doors or anything behind a hidden door. And I think all of us need people like that in our life. The secrets you can't talk about control you. And if you don't have people you can let down your guard with. And sometimes Tim's come and he's spoken some tough stuff in my life, but it was stuff I needed to hear. It was beneficial to me too.
Well, we have...
One other thing real quick. When I first met him, for his 40th birthday, I met him before he was 40.
30 years ago.
35. I met him 35. So I met him before, 34 years ago. I met him before he was 40. But on his 40th birthday, he bench pressed 400 pounds for 10 reps. On his 50th birthday, he bench pressed 400 for 1 rep. I was there. You know what I called him after that? Sir.
And in his next birthday, he can't do 1 rep.
Well, he's had so many replacement parts. He's a bionic man. I know if he got a hold of me, he could still kill me. But I just figure I'd kick him in the knee and run.
You got to tell them the story in Bulgaria when I was coaching. You woke me up.
Oh, yeah. So we went to Bulgaria the next year, and he wasn't able to play because he had a basketball injury. He never mentions that I set out for 4 plays, but he set out for the whole next season. But there were businessmen. So communism was falling, and these businessmen wanted to talk business. They wanted to somehow get connected with the West. They wanted to build things up. And, you know, Tim's a professional and so on. So the night before, Tom Snedden, did you remember him? He was the district attorney here. He was involved with this ministry as well. And he was rooming with a guy who was a player at UCLA, defensive end, who's starter at defense, a huge guy. And in their room that night, this one night, a cat burglar robbed him blind. Here's the #1 law enforcement guy in Santa Barbara County, and here's this massive guy, and they get ripped off. So we were a little bit nervous. We knew something was going on. Well, I had word that there was a businessman who wanted to meet early in the morning with some of the guys that we brought over, including Tim. Tim had already gone to sleep. And so Don Hopwood, who used to play for UCLA and also played for San Francisco 49ers, he was with us on this trip. And somebody said, well, we got to wake up Tim and tell him. And he said, I'm not going to go in and wake up Tim. Hopwood's huge. I said, I'll wake him up. It's no big deal. He's my friend, you know. So we used to say stoya boza blasia, which was Russian for you can eat more standing up. So I go in the room, and Hopwood is right behind me, and he's like using me as a human shield. He's got hold of me with both hands. And I shake Tim's toe, and I say, stoya boza blasia, stoya boza. He goes, who's there? Who's there? Like we were maybe trying to rob his room that night. Yeah. who's there? And he just gets out of bed and he starts pushing me. He doesn't see me. And Hopwood's down the hall. He's taking off. And I'm being pushed out of the room, and I'm seeing my whole life flash before me. And finally he goes, "Oh, Jerry, how are you? What's up?"
Always an offensive lineman. Always.
Well, that was a pretty defensive move, if you ask me. Yeah.
Yeah. The ministry that you bring, and we'll talk about on the 28th, you spend a lot of time. I don't think I'm telling stories out of school. He has a cottage on the property, and you stay there when you're here that 3 or 4 months. You watch the weather report, and the minute there's no snow, you go back.
Oh, yeah. Well, that's basic. No, we come for 3 months, January to the end of March.
Did you bring the rain this last week?
Well, I'll tell you, my son, I've got family in Chicago, and it was 72 there in Chicago in February. It was the warmest day on history, and it was like 48 or 52 here. I couldn't believe it. I should have stayed in Chicago.
Yeah. Well, there's weather, and there's this other theory that it's going to be all burnt up in 50 years, a global something. I trust the weather.
Well, the other thing, too, is the beauty here. And so I tell people, if you believe in Jesus, when you die, you go to Santa Barbara. So you might as well come a little early,
Yeah, it makes holding your spiritual thoughts, your devotion, blessed even more by the beautiful, beautiful location we're in. I go down to Biltmore Beach every Sunday before church for an hour to do devotionals and cheat the Sabbath by planning my business a little bit and reading emails, and then I go to church, and it's a blessing. I spend the first 15 minutes thanking the Lord for Biltmore, the ocean, the islands, if I can see them, and I know they're there, whether I can see them or not. He placed them there, the coastline, and then I even say, thank you for allowing us to plant these trees and grow them here. And it's just...
The scriptures say the heavens declare the glory of God, and the earth showeth his handiwork. Mm-hmm. The stars are more glorious here than they ever are in Chicago. And I come here for the winter. All the constellations in the scriptures that are mentioned are all from the winter sky. I think it's because we're more familiar with that sky. The nights are longer and so on. You see it. And it's the same constellations all the time. And there's regularity. You can set your watch by the movements of the heavens, the design, the purpose, and so on. And then you watch the tides. And you can mark when the tides are going to be. They can predict them, and we can know months in advance when the tide will be on such and such a day. How is that possible if this is all a chaos? Yeah. And you begin to look at these things, and you're in awe. There's a sense of wonder. And then, like you say, you look out, and you know the islands are there whether you see them or not. But you got the channel, and the channel, the whales migrate there, and the whales somehow, I don't know if somebody gives them a phone call, it's time to go north again, or it's time to go. They know. It's amazing to me.
That nature is beautiful. Where I live, we have a swimming pool. I don't use it, but it's between my cottages and the owner's house. And every year, and it happened this Monday, I walk out, and there's 2 ducks in the swimming pool on their migration south. Yeah. They stop there, and I try not to scare them.
There's something about the design you see in the universe and the way it works. And Tim's a guy who works with numbers, and they work all the time the same way. It's amazing to me. There's an objective reality that exists independent of our thoughts about it.
2 and 2 is really 4?
Yeah, it is.
I never trust my teachers, and I was so happy to hear that maybe 2 and 2 was 5.
Well, some education these days, they might even tell you that. We've got to get back to the good old reading, writing, and arithmetic.
I think the answers in that book, I in just a little political aside, with what we're doing to our children in some areas of government, gender modification, operating on them and changing their sex. And I keep saying, suffer the little children to come unto me, for such is the kingdom of God. And that's just, to me, the greatest sin is what we're doing to children that are maybe confused. I drug a doll around till I was probably 4 years old, and it fell apart. Today they would have me in a skirt. It's just what we do to treat what is normal is just an abomination.
Jesus said, if anyone causes one of these little ones to stumble, it'd be better for him if a millstone were tied around his neck and he was cast in the sea. So I'm a philosopher. My doctorate's in philosophy. And the very nature of truth is there has to be something objective that supports a truth claim. Truth is not reality. Truth is what I think about reality when I think accurately about it. If I say this is a pen, that's true because there's a reality that supports the claim. But the word pen is arbitrary initially. I could call it a Gesortenblatt instead of a pen. But once I decide that the symbol that I'm going to use for this is pen, it's no longer arbitrary if I'm going to have community. If I'm going to have communication, we have to be on the same page with this. So if I say, well, you can call me whatever pronoun you want. You can call me whatever gender you want. What ends up happening is because I'm denying or not even concerned about what the reality is, but it's all subjectivism. Consequently, communication dies, and with that, community begins to fall apart, and we have what the Bible talked about, the Tower of Babel once again, where the society falls apart. And we're seeing the threshold of that, but I am an utter optimist. I live in hope. Societies cannot handle that kind of denial of reality for long. And eventually the rubber band stretches so far that it snaps back. And I think we're on the threshold of the rubber band about ready to snap back.
Yeah, there's been, I watch Fox News, which it's hard to find a female host that doesn't have a cross or a Star of David. And it's, I love Pete Hischef on Sunday morning, the Fox and Friends, 7 o'clock, it's the time to end, and he ends it always, go to church. Here on a commercial TV, that's welcome. What we're doing in this confusion, is that nature? Is that we're just a confused being? Or is that stimulated by some sort of evil forces?
I think it's probably lots of these things. And I don't like sweeping generalizations. I think you can say, you see some person struggling with this, it might be for this reason. You can have a person who could maybe be struggling with sexual identity because they were molested as a child. They weren't protected. You can have another person who's struggling because they think, well, I have these feelings, and so they move that way. Or somebody else being coerced into it, or somebody else feeling like this is my social set, everybody else is doing it, I'm doing it. Here's the other thing. If you had two giraffes, a male and female giraffe, and you put them together, what do you get? Baby giraffes. You have a male and female kangaroo. You put them together, what do you get? Baby kangaroos. You have two people of the same gender, and you put them together, what do you get?
Nothing.
Missionaries. The only way the group increases is by recruitment. And that puts at risk the poor kids who are out there, who are not realizing they're going to be preyed upon. I grew up in the inner city of Los Angeles. I still remember the two guys that came to the YMCA to work with kids, and how these two guys both came on to me. And I said to the one guy, you get me back to the wire, I'm going to put my fist through your face. But they knew there were kids there, and they came to pray upon them. Most of the people that worked there were giving heart and soul to encourage kids. But there are places like this. I worked years ago with a student, and she was on a women's softball team. Most of the coaches on women's softball team are giving heart and soul to help kids, but she was preyed upon by a coach who knew there were girls there who could be preyed upon.
Well, we had here with the Catholic Church, and really throughout the world, the preying on mainly boys, but also young girls by priests and leaders. One of the worst in this area was a Mormon baseball coach up in Santa Maria, and they found out about it. They put him through rehab rather than criminal behavior, and he was all rehabilitated. In a couple of years, he was back at it. And so it's not just the Catholics; it's a sin that, for some reason, a drive that some men fall into. That I guess.
The really careful thing we have to do is, while these people who prey upon children may come from certain groups, we don't want to project what they did on the whole of that group.
Oh, no.
So if you've got Catholic priests, say, who molested priests, if one child's who have molested kids, if one child's molested, that's egregious. But if I am judging all priests by virtue of that, that's also egregious, because you've got this vast number of people who gave up everything to serve God and their fellow man. Thomas Aquinas once said, an abuse does not nullify a proper use. Let me say it again. An abuse does not nullify a proper use. If you judged any segment of society by virtue of its worst examples, none of us could stand. And consequently, you have bad professors, bad students, bad politicians, bad used car salesmen, whatever. And so we don't want to, in any way with a sweeping judgment, dismiss all. Let's look at each individual case.
Wait, you said professor and pointed at yourself. You said politician and pointed at me. You didn't say bad financial.
Yeah, but I don't know any. My whole exposure to financial advisors is Tim. I don't know any bad financial advisors. That's
He is
thing.
good.
Yeah.
We were supposed to be about now in the show talking about his triad and his way of protecting in people he's handling their investment and the ups and downs and in the long and short term, and we'll do that soon.
Yes.
Yeah, because today we're just picking on you. That's all.
Well, I thought having Jerry Root available, this would be a special show, and I think it is.
It is. He's been a real blessing. I'm struggling to find a pastor to do my Easter week, the week of Passion and Resurrection. This year I've had several great ones, and I don't think I'll beat the one I had last year, which was Jerry. Strange story. You know Father Bob.
Yes.
Greek. I always do the Greek Orthodox week of Passion after I do the Protestant Catholic,
Sure.
because they have a different calendar.
Sure.
So it gives me another shot a couple of weeks later, and Father Bob's great. Although I tease him because he's come to my Presbyterian church and taken communion with me, and I go to him and I say, now I'm going to come to your church and take communion. He says, you can't. What do you mean I can't? He says, you have to be a Orthodox Christian to take communion in my church. So I always tease him with that. I left him a message about a week ago, and on Monday at 4 in the afternoon, I get a call. He says, I'm in Tanzania, and it's just sunup. And I thought I'd call you. And, why are you doing it? And his church, and I think it's more the denomination, I'm sure the local church can't be doing as much as needs to be done, is they have a mission to provide clear drinking water to people in Africa. And he was in Tanzania following up on what they were doing there.
Yeah.
So he's a blessed friend.
Well, Jerry has had a tremendous journey bringing Jesus and the gospel to so many people all over the world. He's lectured at over 80 universities and colleges. He's lectured in over 19 countries.
81 on C.S. Lewis in 19 countries. I've lectured at, I don't know, probably 100 universities here in America.
100 universities, and he's just had a wonderful experience. And this experience.
Well,
that we had,
those universities had low standards.
Yeah, right.
But you raised them.
So he mentioned the second season when the American Eagles were going to Eastern Europe. This trip was to Bulgaria to play games, football games, and I was playing one-on-one with one of the kids I was coaching at Bishop out on the outdoor courts, and I blew my knee out and had to have knee surgery, so I didn't get to play. So I was a coach.
But you still went, right, to coach.
I went and I coached. I had Jerry doing
You have a
up downs.
But we should use a term to be non-gender, but you have a saint as a wife.
Yeah, that's right.
But there's a thing, though. When we get there, we're in Bulgaria. The Bulgarians were horribly hassled in the Ottoman era, and they hated the Turks.
Yeah.
And so consequently, all of Europe seems to hate the gypsies, the Roma people.
Yeah.
And there were these Turkish gypsies who were in Bulgaria. So these are the lowest of the low in the social class. The Bulgarians don't like Turks, the Bulgarians don't like gypsies, and here are these gypsies, and they were Christians. And they came to us and they said, could somebody in your group come speak to us? And my heart just broke. And I said, Tim, you gotta go do this.
Because he had to play. He had to play, so he couldn't.
And?
So he had me go, and there was a translator. And I would always like to talk about...
You were talking to gypsies or just Bulgarians?
Bulgarian gypsies.
Gypsy Turks.
Out in the countryside. And I like to tell the story of the Pistons of Power.
Yeah.
And this is a tremendous story. And it's about how this tremendous athlete comes to faith. Brian Sternberg, who was the world record holder in the pole vault, and one of the greatest athletes in the world at the time. And this was in the early '60s, and he it seemed like anything he decided he was going to do, he would have succeeded. Yes, absolutely. And so he was at the University of Washington, and he came by the gymnastics room, and he saw these guys on the trampoline, and they were trying to do a perfect triple somersault. No one had ever done that before. And so Brian Sternberg said, I'm going to be the first one to do that. So he started working out with the gymnasts on the trampoline, and sure enough, he was the first person to ever perform a perfect triple somersault. Wow. Now he's the world record holder in the pole vault, and just unbelievable success in everything he tried. Well, this one day he's in the gymnastic room on the trampoline. There's nobody there spotting him, and he goes up for a triple, and he was off. And when he came down, he hit his head on the side of the trampoline and broke his neck, and fell in a helpless heap right next to the trampoline, couldn't move. And a maintenance guy came by and saw him, called an ambulance. They got him to the hospital. So he goes to the hospital, and he's in this bed that turns every 60 seconds to keep the blood flow going. He was unable to perform one human act. And they thought, geez, I don't know if he's even going to make it. And a girl that he grew up with, that lived in his neighborhood, came to see him at the hospital. And she would talk to him and encourage him. And she'd say, I'm saying prayers for you. And he'd say, I don't want to hear about any prayers. If there's a God, I don't want to have anything to do with him, that he'd allow this to happen to me. And she just kept coming back. Well, she had to leave for some time. And she came back a few weeks later to visit him. And for the first time, she saw him with a smile on his face. And she wondered, maybe they found a way to cure him. What happened? And he said, you know what? I accepted Jesus Christ as my Savior. And my life has changed. For the first time, I'm now happy. And he became a spokesman for the Fellowship of Christian Athletes to tell his story. And the last time that he did his presentation was in Estes Park, Colorado, at a Fellowship of Christian Athletes conference. And a big guy by the name of Wes Wilmer carries him out onto the stage. He looks like a Charlie McCarthy doll. But before he carried him out, they showed videos of him. 2 pistons of power, his legs running down and placing the pole vault down, going up for a world record in the pole vault. Best in the history of the planet. And then he carries out what looks like a Charlie McCarthy doll. Puts him in a seat. Puts one leg over the other to kind of make him look human. And pulls the microphone up underneath him so he could speak. And he gives his testimony to these several thousand kids in this auditorium about how important his faith is and his relationship with Jesus Christ. And a lot of times he would pass out when he was given his testimony. And this one time he's in a raspy kind of gasping voice, he had to finish this presentation to these kids. And he said, "Oh, it's my hope and my prayer that you never have to go through what I go through every day. The pain that I go through every day. The humility of not being able to perform one human act. Oh, it's my hope and my prayer that doesn't ever happen to you. Unless that's what it takes. If that's what it takes for you to develop a relationship with Jesus Christ, it's my hope and my prayer the same thing happens to you."
Oh.
You talk about a powerful message.
Yeah.
Well, I would say this to the football players, and this was part of my presentation, is about Brian Sternberg. Well, I said, "Jerry, what am I going to tell these Egyptian Greek, or these
Greek gypsy, Turkish gypsies.
these gypsies?" And he says, "Tell them about Brian Sternberg." So I get in this car to drive out in the countryside, and I'm all by myself. These guys are going to play the game, and I don't know where I'm going. I'm with this guy, and I said, "So, where are we going?" He goes, "What?" I said, "Where are we going?" "Where?" I said, "Yes." He couldn't speak very well. He's my translator. So we get to this place, there are all these people in this huge auditorium, and he's my translator. So I told the Brian Sternberg story, but I never knew how it really was translated to these guys. But they did applaud, and they did act like they enjoyed it.
I feel that way when I see speakers with signers to,
Yeah.
you know, and there's been several scandals where signers said, "We aren't doing anything like that." You know, nobody out there is watching us. But I
you would
always
sign
wonder,
something different than what the speaker was saying?
just making it up, you know. And because the number of deaf that would look to signers greatly diminished by technology. You know, it's
I had this friend who was a missionary in Latin America, and this youth pastor came to his place and was going to speak, and my missionary friend said, "Okay, I'll translate for you." So the youth pastor gets up and says, "This morning I want to talk about 3 ships." And so the translator says, "This morning he's going to talk about 3 boats." And then he says, "Friendship, fellowship, and worship." And so my friend said, I just gave my own message.
Well, we mentioned Christian athletes. I became a fan of Air Force. Well, I guess then it was the military academy graduate. No, it was Annapolis graduate who got his degree and then had 4 years he was supposed to serve. But he kind of was a good athlete, but he insisted on keeping his commitment. And Roger Staubach was one of the greatest quarterbacks of
Naval
all
Academy.
Naval
He was
Academy.
Naval Academy.
And he was, I think it's the first time I noticed what Christian Athletes Organization, and he was the chairman of it. And he went on, he kept his word. He got elected, and correct me when I'm wrong, frequently, with less bluster. He went on and got elected to Congress in '94 as a Republican, I think from Oklahoma. He was part of the group that committed to 3 terms. And at the end of the 3 terms, he refused to run again. As A.J. Watt the
Yeah.
football
player.
linebacker.
He was the Oklahoma guy. He was an Oklahoma guy.
Got elected for 3 terms. That could have gone on could still be congressman, but their word was their bond. And unfortunately, we need more short-term congressmen that keep their word.
Well, you want congressmen who are good. And if they can do it for 3 terms, great, and they go out, that's fine. If they're long-term congressmen, I'd hate to see the good ones go out if they've got good experience and so on.
Yeah.
So it's again, one of these ones where you don't want to make the sweeping generalization.
Yeah.
How do we ferret out the ones that are, how do we get rid of the ones that aren't good, and how do we keep the ones that are? And how do we keep them from not getting corrupted if they're in for a long time too?
Yeah, that's a basic problem in government, and it's going to be in the election season we come into, that being corrupted in government is going to be more and more an issue, and it's from both sides. Some books written on the power blood in politics, and of course Nancy Pelosi and the Bidens, but also the Republican head of the Senate who just resigned.
Yeah,
his family
Mitch
got
McConnell.
rich in China,
Mitch McConnell.
and his wife was Secretary of Transportation twice, Cho, and so I think him stepping down as head of the Republicans in the Senate, maybe it was a time, but maybe it is coincidental with the scandal. And it's sad, people go there with no money and all of a sudden they're multimillionaires. It doesn't work that way. There are congressmen, senators that go there with money and leave with half of it.
Yeah.
Something I'm thinking though, and I tell my clients all the time, we've got so many things that we can be disappointed about, and a lot of that has to do with the politics that's taken place, and what we're seeing take place. I mean, we talk about it and say, 20 years ago, would you have believed that it's possible that we could be where we are right now with some of these crazy things that are taking place? But the thing that we have to remember too is to keep our head up and to stay the course. I use that a lot.
Yeah, every day.
Regardless of the difficulties that we face, we don't quit. We continue to go to the direction that we know is the right direction for you and your family and those that you care about. And I think that is the message that we really have to get out to folks. Don't get down and feel that you're going to give up. We can't do that. We have to continue to fight the good fight.
And along that line too, part of it is being able to hear another person you disagree with, to hear what they say. David Brooks has this new book, How to Know a Person, to listen, to call them out. You can ask a person a public question, what's your name? Are you from Santa Barbara? If they say, oh, no, I moved here 10 years ago. Oh, where were you from before? Why did you move? And so on. And you end up having a deeper understanding. Oh, you hold that position. It's a little different than mine. Why do you hold it? Rather than immediately jumping on their case.
I think you told the story of taking lemonade to the garbage man.
Oh, yeah. Iced tea. It was iced tea.
Iced tea?
Yeah, over a period of time, and developed a relationship with my garbage guy. Matter of fact, he would always come at 10 o'clock, and I'd always be out there with something cold to drink in the summer, something warm to drink in the winter. One day he came by at noon, and I said, gee, Mike, you're a little bit late today. And he said, yeah, I had troubles on my route. I said, it's about lunchtime. Did you eat lunch yet? And he said, no. I said, you want to come in? I'll make you a sandwich. He says, okay. I didn't know those guys could do that. He changed his whole route and came by my house every week at noon after that. But we developed spiritual conversation and had some great conversations, and there was some real depth in him.
I don't know where I've heard this. Maybe in that book, Offer Yourself.
Yeah.
To other people.
Yeah.
And you just be surprised, as I talking about my life insurance agent at Tremblay, buying life insurance, and hour and a half of sharing with this 40-year-old with a 2-year-old child, going from the Catholic Church to a new church, and
My first doctoral supervisor was Basil Mitchell. He was a professor at Oxford University. He was an eminent professor. And he used to say, you'll never be neutral. And you shouldn't expect to be neutral. Your whole life has been informed by the books you've read, the people you've met, the experiences you've had. But when we're engaged in relationship with one another, what we should seek to be is impartial. So how do you achieve impartiality? And he said you do it by giving the other person veto power over your impression of their position. So if my wife says this to me and I hear this, we talk like this, we miss each other completely. And then I say to her 3 days later, hey Claudia, do you remember when you said this to me? She said, I never said that to you. And I go, I was in the room, now it's a matter of integrity. No, I didn't hear her, I heard her through my grid. So I say, is this what you meant? She says, heavens no. I say, give it to me once more, because I don't always get it right. She says, yeah, we've established that in this relationship. So she gives it to me again, and finally we get on the same page, and now there can be some substantive exchange.
Well, you hit on something, and I don't mean to take some of the last 2 minutes. I had a friend who said, I sat in that church for 20 years and I never heard the gospel preached. I said, say that again. And he said, I sat in that church and never heard the gospel preached. I said, you're not saying it wasn't preached, you're saying you didn't hear it.
Yeah.
And took him aback. He started going to the Catholic Church. Last minute, going to see you on the 28th. We're going to talk all about C.S. Lewis. You can't mention Tremblay's name.
Oh, that won't be possible.
Yeah.
That won't be possible.
And we're going to get together in a month or so and talk about finances.
Yeah, that's right.
And you can't mention root.
No. I'll talk about politics and the economy.
No,
There's a lot to be said about it.
He can talk about a doofus that came to his office and needed help named Root, and how he was able to bring order out of the chaos. He was my Mother Teresa.
When did you spend time in India? Every once in a while I have to act like I know something. Like Mother Teresa wasn't Indian, wasn't she?
She was from Albania.
Yeah.
I lecture there every year.
Well, Jim, thanks for having us today.
Yeah.
This was a lot of fun.
It was fun.
I really appreciate you both. You both have meant a lot to me personally. I want you to know that. Don't say anything, we're almost off, but I want you to know that your friendship, your witness, your education, your sharing, both of you, all four of those, and maybe a lot more, have meant a lot to me.
Well, thank
So
you.
God bless you both.
Thank you.
And God bless you.